This is the Arturia Minifreak, a 6-voice hybrid analog synthesizer, and it can sound like this. But it can also sound like this. And this. And so much more. Now, the Minifreak has been out for almost 2 years, so this won't be a dedicated tutorial of every single feature. That would be pointless. There's already great videos like that. Instead, what I want to do is deep dive into some of my favorite features and give you guys an in-depth look at why I love the Arturia Minifreak and truly think it makes a strong case for being the best first synthesizer for anybody on the market right now. Now, in full transparency, Arturia reached out and offered to send me a Minifreak, which is super cool. That's why the paid promotion tab is checked, but no money changed hands. And of course, I'm just gonna make some music with this, give you guys my honest thoughts. If you guys enjoy this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and let's get started with a demo song. Now, hopefully you enjoyed that first jam. It was really simple, but it did make use of one of my favorite things about the Minifreak, which is the performance features. Now, everything you heard in that jam, except for the drums and sweeps, was from only the Minifreak with no external pedals or effects, and that's gonna be the case for this entire video. I was talking about performance controls. I think one of my favorite things about the Minifreak that I wasn't expecting is just how many different ways there are to mangle sequences, arpeggios, and really get a more nuanced performance out of your synth. Another example of how useful that sequencer can be is for really glitchy, heavy bass lines. Check this one out. As you can hear, Spice and Dice plus the macros are a super cool way to morph the sound, but one of the things that I enjoyed the absolute most that I was not expecting to was how well the Minifreak works as a controller for its own plugin. Here's an example where I'm using the VST rather than the actual synth to modulate and record in real time all the automation on this FM bell and bass in this deep house track. Okay, now that we're warmed up, let's show off the other side of the Arturia Minifreak. While the Minifreak can definitely emulate analog sounds, in my opinion, it's at its absolute best when it's off the rails doing incredible sound design like this. Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed the track and hopefully it was a good contrast to the chill, simple synthwave one before, but there was a lot to unpack. I think the absolute best thing about the Minifreak is that every single parameter is modulatable or assignable to the macros. So that main bass line you were hearing was actually created by doing a whole bunch of different complex comb filtering, distortion, tempo synced LFOs, synced to the clock in Logic, and then modulating everything live in real time to make that moving, morphing, living bass line. Another super cool feature is that the Arturia Minifreak can be used as an audio processor for your other synthesizers via its audio in oscillator. So take a listen to this. I've got this Brie 6, which has a beautiful VCO sound with pulse width modulation. But its effects are a little lackluster. So I want to run it through the Arturia Minifreak, and basically what I'll do is I'll unplug the synthesizer from my patch bay here and plug it into the audio in. Now we don't hear anything. But all we need to do is go to our audio in oscillator and raise the volume. The gain staging can be a little finicky, but you can change it in here in the sound utility, and I find about -2 to +2 tends to work best depending on your synth. Now we can do everything from simple filtering sending aftertouch, adding reverb. That's much better. all the way to much more complicated things like noise mod, decimating, wave folding, which really boosts up the volume here. And even using oscillator 2 to do even more complex modulation like comb filtering. Let's add some stereo effects. And then let's modulate our cutoff with an LFO. With just the Minifreak, we have access to not only a really solid effects box with its digital effects suite, but also some really cool audio rate modulatable effects that you would not normally be able to find on regular effects pedals. Next, let's jump onto the front panel. And like I mentioned, I'm not going to do a beginner tutorial because there's great videos already there. I'm going to show you my favorite features and hopefully you pick up a couple tricks if you already have a Minifreak, or if you don't, it opens your mind to how powerful this little synth can be. All right, so starting from an initialized patch, we've got a whole bunch of different oscillator types, but you probably already know that. So what I'm gonna focus on is my favorite tips and tricks. And we're gonna get a little bit more complex and design a bit more of a complicated patch. So let's get started by picking our oscillator type and let's choose one of the new grain oscillator modes. I absolutely love that they've added a granular engine in here. And yes, you can't import your own samples, at least not as of yet, but there are a whole bunch of really cool factory samples. And the thing with grain and granular synthesis is you almost mangle it so much that the starting point, it's not that important. Hearsay, I know, but it's not that important what you start with, it's what you finish with. Let's bump that up an octave. Bring in oscillator 2. Throw that through some reverb and filter. Release, attack. Throw on some vibrato. Change the vibrato speed. Sorry, my hand was in the way. I absolutely love, first thing I'll talk about I love, well I guess second thing after the granular engines, is the dedicated vibrato LFO that is separate. So, you know, when I first got this, I thought 2 LFOs and kind of, you know, 2 1.5 envelopes, that's solid for a budget synth, but in reality there's 3 LFOs, whereas I almost always do vibrato on 1 LFO. With the Minifreak, it's just right there, it's pre-routed, and you don't have to give up one of your more complex LFOs. Let's do some modulation. And for such a complex synth, the real important stuff, the stuff that you're gonna be going for 99% of the time, is really knob per function, which is awesome. So let's go ahead and start to do some more complex modulation. So my second favorite thing is the ability to quantize the pitch of modulation, which sounds complicated, but it's actually an ingenious style of sound design tool that I haven't really seen, frankly, on any other synth, at least any other hardware synth, which is so cool, especially not in this way. You'll see what I'm talking about here. So let's go ahead and we'll make oscillator 2 the pitch. We're assigning it to our mod matrix there. And let's go ahead and bring LFO1 to oscillator 2 pitch. So it sounds terrible, right? But then we go in and we'll go to the oscillator menu. You can see here, oscillator 2 mod quantize. Now I'm actually gonna go ahead and hold a note down. So continuous, that's probably what we think of, smooth pitch modulation, but we can go into scales and octaves. Fifths. Minor scale, major, a whole bunch of different scales. How cool is that? I was loving the fifths. Let's bump this up. Change the fine tune, we don't need it to be detuned. And then the coolest part here is we can now, because this is being modulated by the LFO, we can now go ahead and make our LFO free. We can make it more interesting of a shape. Let's do slewed sample and hold. And then let's change the speed of LFO1 via LFO2. So we'll make a custom amount here, assign to, custom mod source, sorry, LFO1 rate, and let's go ahead. Let's make that one free as well. Take it off sync. I'm gonna go back to octaves. As cool as this fifth one is, I kind of want to just make it as smooth and harmonious as possible. So how about octaves? Let's change to a more interesting oscillator type. I really like the bass. We've got saturation, wave folding, and noise mod. My favorite. If you know me, you know I love noise mod. Let's take this down just a little bit. Sounding absolutely incredible. Let's throw that to delay. We'll go through our delay types. I love the effects on this. The delays, there is no dedicated tape delay, unfortunately. Maybe they can add that, but there is a, let's go ahead and change the time here and the intensity and the mix. There's a filtered ping pong, which is kind of like a tape delay. Turn down that reverb a little bit, as beautiful as it is. All right, this is sounding great already, and we haven't even used our cycling envelope yet, so let's send that to the cutoff to do, at first, some standard envelope modulation, and then I'll show you it in looping mode, which is my third favorite thing. At first, I was a little disappointed that there was only one envelope, one ADSR, between the amp and the filter, but the fact that it has this cycling envelope, it's actually so flexible. So let's go ahead into our mod matrix here and send our cycling envelope to our cutoff. So if I turn down our attack for a second, you can see it works just like a regular ADSR if we want. But the beauty is when we loop it. And then it can function just like another LFO. How cool is that? So let's go bring our regular envelope back. And we can control the speed of this by modulating our third assignable destination to be the fall or rise speed. How cool is that? So now let's send our really cool random LFO1 to the speed of the rise and fall. This is getting a little bassy, so I'm going to switch to bandpass filter and turn down that modulation on the cycling envelope so it's a bit more subtle. Remember my rule, subtle modulation in large amounts is better than large amounts of non-subtle modulation. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but it makes sense to me. Nice analog filter. So let's go ahead and boost the volume here. I love that they have it just right in the menu, preset volume, +6. Bandpass filter will almost always make your sounds much quieter because it's cutting out so much information. Beautiful and dreamy, right? So the final thing I want to show you here on this patch is the amazing macros, which again, I was thinking to myself, how much am I going to use these? This really feels more like a gimmick kind of ported over from a VST, but the macros and these capacitive touch sliders are actually really responsive. And I have found myself making macros for pretty much every single patch that's going to be in my patch set, including this one. I'm going to save this one for my patch set too. And you'll see my kind of workflow for making macros and why I think the Minifreak is so wonderful with just how it allows you to assign anything. It really is a way deeper synth in terms of modulation, morphing sounds than I had any idea of from the times I've used it before. So we'll start with macro 2. Let's make a little bit of cutoff. Let's bring in the saturation. Actually, let's make the cutoff go away. I'm not sure about the cutoff here. I like it kind of dark. Let's make the attack down so it becomes a pluck. Cool. And we'll bring the release down. Cool, I'm happy with that for number 1. And number 2, let's mess with the grains. So we'll go back to oscillator 1. And by bringing the macro all the way up to max, you can freely move stuff around and kind of hear how it's gonna affect your sound. Let's actually make that solo the grain. Beautiful. Wow. So now, if we go out of that, we basically have a brand new sound that we can morph, where if we go up, I'm not crazy about how aggressive that gets, so let's edit it one more time here, right? We've got some time, so we'll go in and we'll just remove what we've done. Let's restart macro 2 here. I want this to be more of a pretty sound versus a really aggressive sound. Let's make it go up an octave. And then for the last one, I'm gonna remove this and click for more destinations. I'm going to go for LFO1 amount and reduce it. So basically now this should get rid of that really cool quantized pitch modulation. There we go. So now, I'm happy I did that. That's much prettier. Now we have our two macros. And again, I'm gonna leave that in without cutting it out because it shows you the kind of journeys this synth takes you on. What a beautiful pad. Bring in the oscillator too. Pitch modulation. All right, well, that is where I'll wrap up that patch walkthrough today. So as a reminder, if you've enjoyed that patch and the other sounds you've heard throughout this video, my miles away custom Minifreak preset pack is coming really soon. So please subscribe to my channel and like this video so you don't miss when I upload the full no talking sound demo of all the patches coming soon. Let's wrap this up with just a couple of pros and cons, as well as who I think this synth is for and who I think it's not. Now, as you can tell, I obviously really like the Minifreak and it blew me away for these more experimental sounds. So I think that if you're interested in that kind of sound palette, maybe you have a couple other analog synths, or maybe you're coming from VSTs and you want to get your first hardware synthesizer, but your tastes gravitate more towards kind of, synths like Omnisphere, Alchemy, Serum, the Minifreak is a no-brainer. The fact that it comes with its own VST and you can use it as a VST controller is such an easy workflow to get used to. I think as a first synth, it's a no-brainer. If you're into that more modern, digital, granular, distorted, kind of edgy sound, it's a no-brainer. I think the only con I would have, and the only person I would maybe not recommend the Minifreak to, is if you're really mainly interested more in sort of those classic vintage analog tones. The Minifreak definitely does tend, in my opinion, to go more towards a sonic character of experimental and complex sound design, more so than that classic vintage analog warmth. But that's a small price to pay considering this thing's price range, the fact that you can emulate analog sounds as well as granular, as well as FM and everything else. This is kind of like the ultimate jack of all trades synthesizer. The only other con I have, and I'm not sure if they can adjust this in firmware, is currently there's no way to pan the voices to get stereo spread. So if you do want stereo spread, you're kind of limited to the chorus or other stereo modulation effects. And it would be really nice, especially with this beautiful granular engine that they've added, to be able to pan some of the voices to get that more sort of ethereal, atmospheric sound, because I don't really love chorus on those kinds of sounds, but you kind of are limited to that if you want to have a stereo signal hit your delay and reverb. If it sounds like I'm nitpicking, I'm really not. It's more so just because I'm just so impressed by how much this synth could do, and it's got me thinking, well, what if it could do this one last thing? I think if we judge a synth by how much use it gets and how much fun it is to use, then the Minifreak is a resounding success because it's been living on my desk for a month, and despite me having access to all this great gear, the Minifreak is still getting so much use on my productions, tracks, whether it's as a MIDI controller for the VST, or as the synth itself. It's an absolute success for Arturia, and I finally understand why this many years later, it's as popular as it is. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks to Arturia for sending over the Minifreak. If you did enjoy this video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.